more I think about it, I actually hate fishing. Hello everybody, welcome to the Deep Drop. Great to have you back. Although if you're new here, this might be your first time experiencing the Deep Drop. And an absolute welcome to you. Let's roll out the red carpet. Come on in. Get involved. This is a podcast that's fishing related, but we don't get too serious, Adam. We kind of just touch on those things that you talk about when you're on a road trip or you're sitting around a campfire or you're sitting out in the boat when not much is happening and weird and wonderful questions sort of arise.
Yep. You're right. If there's one thing we're allergic to on this show, it's being serious. And we will take the piss wherever possible. So if you're on social media, or if it is your first time listening to the Deep Drop, welcome. I highly recommend you go and have a peek through the back catalogue, because there's some interesting questions we've already got covered, Luke, and heaps more to come. And I think, this episode, a couple of crackers. I like where it's headed.
And while you're here, we'll introduce the fact that we are now on YouTube. So jump over to the Deep Drop on YouTube and subscribe. Obviously, Instagram is another place you can get amongst it and get involved and give us your thoughts on all of our weird and wonderful topics. And more importantly, just subscribe to the podcast. Share it around with your friends. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your mum and dad, your cousins, your aunties and uncles and their friends. You know what I mean? Just get it out there.
Yeah, I like it.
And that's how we do things. Oh, and also, if you want to really rock out, that I don't know if we're going to touch on this every single episode, ads, but we kind of have to.
No, we are, because we keep adding tunes.
The Deep Drop Fishing Tunes is just a playlist that we've set up on Spotify on the back of a topic that came up a couple of weeks ago about should you be pumping tunes while out in the boat. Well, the playlist is getting bigger and bigger, and we're having so many suggestions from you guys out there, which is great. It's turned into a really solid playlist now.
It is. And look, I had a ball the other night flicking through some of the comments and suggestions. So new to the playlist, a little bit of Tool, a little bit of...
It got heavy the other night.
Rammstein. Oh, did I go down a Rammstein rabbit hole that night? Yeah. That was really cool. So a couple of Rammstein songs on there, a bit of Deftones. I like where it's headed.
I listened to it the other day and a bit of 28 Days popped up and I thought, we've nailed it. We've nailed it. Anyway, we've got a podcast to do. I'm Luke McCredden. He's Adam Ring. Let's get into it. Should there be tighter bag limits on Yellowtail Kingfish?
Luke, has this not been a little bit of a hot topic, especially in Victoria over the last couple of seasons, where we've seen, I guess, our Yellowtail Kingfish turn up in different places, which made them a little bit more accessible to the average boater. And I did see the rounds of this exact question being asked on that, and I have a really clear answer from me.
Good.
And it is, I don't think they should be changed. And I know we said at the top of the program that we like to take the piss on this show and we don't talk too seriously, but this one is a serious topic, and I want people to get involved, because I guess it seems to be the more passionate you get about this species, the more people want to see the bag limits changed. But the reason I think they shouldn't be is because the fishery isn't that big. As it's still developing here in Victoria. They're changing where they're caught. We've seen a big explosion of fish the last two sets. So this one and last down the front of Western Port. Yep. That's where this question sort of came from. I don't think we need to get excessive. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think too many are getting caught. But I understand why the question comes, because you see a lot of dead fish in a short period of time. So I understand optics are huge and they are at play in specific with this question. But I think we need to take a step back and take a deep breath and look at the big picture and there really isn't that many fish getting taken, in my opinion.
No, I think you're spot on, and I think there's certainly a peak and a spike in fish capture over a certain period of time, which is typically through that summer, warmer months, and it does seem like there's a big influx of kingfish captures. But in reality, the short period throughout the year, that's not to say that we should just dismiss the fact that we don't need to look after them. They're fine. That's still a fish population that we want to make sure that we do the right thing and look after because, mate, the excitement levels around this species are like, I'm saying, probably like none other. Certainly in Victoria, there's a real hype around them. There's a fashion around it, which is second to none. And it's great. It's exciting. It's awesome for the fishery. I'm with you. I don't think it needs to be it doesn't need to be overthought. I think the people behind the scenes who set the limits and set the bags and size limits are well aware of the species and the fishery and how it all unfolds. I think the only thing I'd say because everyone's got opinions and we absolutely encourage everyone to give us their thoughts on social media, on Instagram. The Deep Drop is a place to do it. I think we need to keep in mind the fact that this species isn't particularly one that is just residential. So, for example, if you go to a particular spot and catch 10, you're not wiping out necessarily a population. They're constantly on the move. And, if you do happen to, over the course of a couple of weeks, the weather's amazing, lots of anglers get out and catch their bag, it's not going to destroy that particular population because within another couple of weeks, a whole new group of fish will move into that area. So I'm not saying go out there and rape and pillage, but what I am saying is I think it's okay for now. And we're not, setting fish traps like they did back in the day on the New South Wales coast. So what we're doing is sustainable at the moment. Now, I'm not a scientist or a fisheries officer or anything like that. So I'm just saying, from my point of view, from my knowledge, I think it's okay at the moment.
Well, that was going to be, I guess, my question on top of a question to you, Luke, because at least with this topic that we're talking about now, the question of bag limits in kingfish was coming out of a long-term sustainability approach. So it wasn't like we've been seeing declining numbers of kingfish over the last 5 years. No, it's actually the opposite. We're seeing increased numbers, and
100%.
Those people bringing it up are really passionate about making sure that fishery continues to flourish. I guess, and I do trust in the body we have around looking after recreational fishing at the moment. They've proven to have done a great job.
Yeah.
So that's not the issue. But I guess what's the trigger to make even them look at it? Because social media comes into play massively here because the optics are pretty terrible at times. And I'll be the first to admit it. When there's a red hot bite and you see 15, 20, 30 different photos of fish that are all between 80 and $1.15 m, the optics it does look bad. So I understand where it's not so much panic. No one's panicking, but people are asking questions, which is a great thing. But when does it get to a point where it does have to seriously be looked at? Because we'd like to get to that point before it's a problem and we notice declining fishery.
I think it's almost the opposite of what you're saying. Is the point of where we think we might have a problem isn't necessarily seeing seeing multiple fish on the deck of boat. I think it's when no one's catching a fish. The people that would normally catch a fish are just not even seeing them and not catching fish. Maybe then we've got a problem. I think it's a tough one. I think the people, as I said, the VFA, we do an amazing job across all fisheries, right? But I think we need to understand that I don't think they're overly swayed by social media. And what I mean by that is I think they understand that there's going to be hype and there's going to be influx of photos. And yes, some of them, the optics aren't great sometimes when there's blood on the deck and fish kills and all that sort of thing. But
that's no difference to bluefin tuna.
No, it's no different to King
Snapper.
George Whiting.
We've been having this conversation.
Exactly.
That's right, since the beginning of time.
As long as those people are doing the right thing as far as keeping to their limits, I trust again that the powers that be are in control and will know well before we do if there's any issues, because they've proved it time and time again that they're on top of things before us punters even know about it. So there's a lot of that. The other thing I would bring up too, now in Victoria the bag limit is 5 and the size limit is 60 centimetres. we've got a great amount of anglers in Victoria that are more than capable. But I would suggest that from my viewpoint, there's not a hell of a lot of people that bag out on kingfish every day.
That's a great point, and I'm so glad that you brought it up.
Well, I've got to get one good point in the series of the deep drop.
It's taken. What are we? Episode
23, and I finally said something that makes sense. I'm out.
But it is a great point, and I think that's what I mean by when I say step back and actually see the big picture. The bite period in which we saw all of these fish this season might have only been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks tops. It's actually not. You know what I mean? It's not, and that's where the social media comes into it, and it looks bad, but it's actually not.
No, and that's the peak bite period. Like, the beauty is kingfish are around a fair chunk of the year, but this is my point. You're going out to get one. You're going out to get a couple on a good day. Like, and don't get me wrong. If you happen to get one of those days where they're just going nuts and you're releasing them, even better. The other thing I would suggest is I'm not sure many people, even if they have one of those epic days, I'm not sure many people are keeping 5 even. You know what?
I don't reckon they are.
We fish
Anglers are as responsible as they've ever been as far as I'm concerned. There's always 100%. Cowboys, but the majority are only keeping, and I think it's a huge thing that's coming into this industry now that I think has been borrowed and adopted from the hunting side of this. I know it's a completely different industry, but hunting and fishing kind of go hand in hand. There's been a huge push in hunting in recent times about respecting and not wasting, and I think that's making its way over into the fishing space, which is crucial. It's critical. People now respect the fish that they're catching. They're doing everything they can to put the best quality meat on the table, not wasting anything.
Yeah. Tip of the hat to the spearfishing community as well. They very much take what you need and that's all. And I think you're absolutely right. Just from a general viewpoint, I think rod and reel anglers are starting to sort of lean that way as well. Yeah, that's a very general.
Listen, but that's a species specific thing too, and it's probably a question for another episode. But there are those species where not bagging is not an option.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that's kind of, you think calamari, King George whiting, if you don't get a bag, you're disappointed.
Yep.
But I don't think that applies to kingfish at all.
No, and I even reckon our good friends in New South Wales, we spend a lot of time on that South Coast ads, and not often you see, even when there's hot bites, not often you see, bucket loads of 5 fish. I think their limit's 5 as well.
Yeah, that's right.
65
you don't see
centimetres.
deck loads of fish.
1 or 2, you get plenty of meat. Beautiful eating fish if you prepare it right. So 1 or 2 is more than enough for a good feed for a few people. So, Jesus, we got a bit serious there after you just went off the top and said we don't get serious, mate. So
I know we might have to go back and scratch that. That's a bit shit.
No, but great topic.
This segment way too serious.
Yeah, great topic though. I must say I love Yellowtail Kingfish, and I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts on that. So get involved on Instagram. Let's hear about it. How many casts before you make a move?
Oh, the age-old question. This is something I ask myself on every single fishing trip.
Yes.
I think it almost gets species-specific, but not. I do, and I do a lot of snag hopping, and that's kind of predominantly. I do more of that than any other forms of fishing.
There's a lot of variables, isn't there?
Yeah,
because I think
a lot of it just comes down to your mood on the day.
It does. I've discovered. I'm going to put my hand up and be vulnerable here, Ads. I've discovered that I'm too committed. I'm too committed to a spot. I need to be more ruthless and say, nah, move on. We're done from this spot. It's not happening for me. And a prime example is trout fishing in a river, waiting, because I will look at a stretch or a pool or just a riffle and just go, there is fish here, to the point where you might even see them rising, and I am certainly not the world's greatest trout fisherman by far. I'm not even close. But I'm capable of catching a trout. So I'm like, this looks good. There's got to be fish
to be
here.
one there. Yep.
And I just think my problem is I'm too committed to the job at hand, and I will not leave until. And I've probably missed so many opportunities in these further stretches up the river because I'm like, no, there has to be a fish here. So,
Well, that's probably the best way to tackle it though, Luke, because doubt is the biggest killer of every fisho. And so what I mean by that is, say you have just said that you overwork those pools, refusing to believe that there isn't a fish in there. Maybe at the sacrifice of some further up, but if you skimmed over them, it's always the grass is greener syndrome. There might not be any fish in those pools sitting up the front, and you're like, well, I didn't spend enough time in the ones that look the best.
yeah, and that's the fear in my mind. I've always got that fear of don't pass up good water, just to get to what you think might be good water.
Yeah.
But then I'm also probably potentially spending time on water that's actually not that good. It just looks presentable.
Well, that's the other side of the coin. Like, I know plenty of times you're paddling from snag to snag and you go, oh, there'd be fish there.
Yeah.
And you don't cast at it because the better looking snag or the big tree lay down or something's just sitting up there where you can see it.
Yeah.
To the point where you skip all this other water. But then when you stop and start fishing it, you're like, oh, I'm wasting my time. There's a good snag up there.
Because how many times, and we can use trout, we can use estuaries for, bream, flathead and so forth. How many times you put some serious hours into, or, serious time into a particular stretch or spot or snag. And then as you drift away and move on, you catch one that's just in an unlikely looking spot. And you just think, shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Well, how many times you peg the perfect cast into the perfect snag and nothing happens, and halfway back to the boat or kayak you get a hit.
Yeah, yeah.
And these fish end up sitting off the snag rather than in it. And it goes against all forms of theory that you've put together about snag fishing. See, the big one is, you hear a lot, you can annoy a cod into eating.
Yeah.
But how long do you annoy it for?
But that doesn't answer the question.
Are you going to sit there for a whole day?
Yeah.
I know. You're going to sit there for a whole day trying to annoy the hell out of one cod to eat the lure?
And I think you could argue most fish you could annoy into a reaction bite or into a frustration bite. But how long do you give it? And if something like a cod is a great example, maybe they're patient.
Yeah, well, do you know what? One thing, and I must admit, I'm only learning this now. One thing, the angle in which you hit the snag can determine whether you get a fish or not. Yeah. So I'll find now, I'll pull up to a snag and hit it from an angle where I think it works best with any current flow, or it can even be determined by how thick the snag is. I'll now work it the whole way around and come back and just try and hit all angles of the snag at different sort of casting angles, because some of these fish can be so weird.
Yeah.
You present that lure in a way that looks slightly off, and yet you cast the exact same lure from a different angle and they're on it as soon as it hits the water.
Yeah.
So I think changing your angles and bits and pieces is probably more important than just sitting there mindlessly flogging the same bit of snag for 30 casts.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. The variables, right? So there's the angle of your cast, but then there's also the argument of how long do I give it till I change colour of my lure, or change presentation or style of my lure? Like, again, using trout fishing, for example, I tend to start with like a hard body minnow sort of thing, and how long before I chuck a soft plastic on, or even like a spinner on, or it's just.
So how is fishing not the most anxiety triggering pastime ever? We all say it's the most relaxing.
The more I think about it, I actually hate fishing.
It's a massive mindfuck.
It is. It's a bit like golf. They say with golf, it's a good walk ruined. So no, but it's what makes fishing, because if it was easy, it would be a bit shit.
It'd be boring.
But it does beg the question, and it's a question I ask myself whether I'm trout fishing, as I said, whether I'm on an estuary in a kayak or a boat. I think like you said, you get sort of hypnotized by a good looking snag if you're bream fishing or estuary perch fishing or something like that, and then even areas that you might be flathead fishing or whiting fishing, and you come across beautiful sort of sandy bottom, and there's a bit of broken, reefy, weedy ground over there, and it's got everything that you'd need to catch the target species. But then you start going after an hour or whatever it might be, or 20 minutes, you might start going, how long do I actually stay here for?
Do you know what? I want to hear from the people that have an exact formula, because I'm sure they're out there. You know, they might pull up to any given snag or sand hole, and they will have to the minute how long they should be waiting there, or how many casts to the cast that they want to be putting in on that snag. That's what I want to hear. I want to see if we can get an average from our listeners, and I want to apply the average to practice and see if it all lines up.
Yeah. Give it a go, because obviously you're out in your kayak quite a bit on the estuaries and stuff. You'd be able to do a direct sort of, I suppose, test on some of these averages. I think it'd be great to see.
Be interesting.
Without opening a can of worms, do you think, and we've spoken about this on the podcast before, the technology like live scope or live scan or whatever the fuck it's called these days changes everything in that regard? Because you can literally go, no, they're not interested. They haven't even looked at my lure.
No, it does. So that, like, the question, how many casts before you move, it could be 0. Like, if you're using that active target, it could be 0.
Yeah, fuck, that would save me some time.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
But anyway, how many casts before you make a move, ads? Undetermined.
Yeah, you tell me. Yeah. I'm all ears.
Why do we hate vibes?
I've got an inkling this might be one of those stupid Victorian things.
I do too. I'm with you 100% on this, because I feel like the further south you go in Australia, the less popular they are. Is that fair to say, do you reckon?
Yeah, because, you know, like everyone, I follow a few shops that are up north, whether it be Northern Territory, Northern Queensland, South Coast, New South Wales. And especially in the Barra market, vibes are still insanely popular. I think it might be one of these weird Victorian trends where we can be arrogant enough to sit back and go, it's too easy to catch fish on vibes, or to use them.
Well, let's define vibes, because there are a few, I suppose, different styles. So you're the tackle guru of the show, ads. So let's break it down into what I'm saying would there be 3 main styles?
Yeah, I reckon you're right. There'd be blades, like your, I guess, ultra aggressive, quite heavy, massive vibration, and just obnoxious to a fish.
Yeah.
You're solely trying to get a reaction bite.
Yep.
Then you've got maybe your
Soft
mask vibe style. Yeah, so you kind of... That seems to be more of a northern state thing. See, that's probably another question in itself. I can't work out why that style of vibe has never really taken off in Victoria, because it's proven to work everywhere else in the country, yet we haven't really adopted it. And then I guess there's... Well, I guess any sort of lipless crank, really. Yeah. If it's something that you can fish vertical...
Like more of a hard body.
You've got your TN style.
Yep. So people might be familiar, I suppose, and they're probably one that do have a fair bit of popularity down here in the native market. Yeah, like the yellow belly cod sort of scene.
But even still, I reckon that's dropped off. I could be wrong. But
yeah, I mean, we've called it out in the question of this particular topic of why do we hate vibes, and I don't know, maybe that's a bit harsh. But there is that element of thought, because it's like sometimes when you're dragging out all your different styles of lures and you're having a big day out on the water, they're typically the last ones you go to in a lot of ways.
Exactly. Yet if you were just getting into lure fishing and you weren't sure where to start, I would 100% guide you and recommend start with vibes.
Is that because they're sort of a dummy's introduction to lure fishing? I mean that in the most respectful way, because you don't have to put any action. Yeah, you don't have to put any action into it. They're foolproof.
They always work. Whether you're lifting and dropping, whether you're slow winding, fast burning, you can cover different parts of the water column with them. They are legitimately the easiest lure to use, and they work consistently. You will, your technique doesn't need to be 100% spot on to get a bite.
That comment there, they work consistently. So why aren't we using them more?
Because I think I honestly think it's a Victorian weirdism.
But is it? But I guess my point is
because it's too easy. It's too easy.
Do you think that's what it is?
Yep, 100%.
And are
it's
they
too
not
easy.
They're not as cool as some of the other sort of. I don't know. Like I just feel like it seems crazy that if they're that effective, and we know a lot of us have used them. People listening to this podcast will be sitting back going, "Yeah, I've used them," but then there also might be a moment in their minds if you're listening to this going, "Actually, I don't use them much anymore." Like, you know what I mean? Like,
do you know what I reckon a fair contributor to this would be? It's too easy to get bycatch on them. So say
shitfish.
So say I was winter brim fishing, where that's vibe heaven.
Yes. Where
the brims school up in the winter, you find a patch of them on the sound, and you can catch them one after the other. But if you're just searching, you're catching little shitty flathead. You might jag a mullet.
Salmon.
You get all these little bits of bycatch that you're not necessarily after. But actually, here's the biggest advertisement for vibes is take the brim comps.
Yeah.
Most anglers will start with a vibe and get their 5 fish because you can get them really quickly. Then they get specific and try and upgrade. And maybe that's another reason why they have maybe fallen out of favour a little bit. Even the tiny fish love them.
Yeah, true.
So you're constantly searching for an upgrade, whereas you can put a big plastic or a bigger hard body, or even some of your crankbaits. You tend not to get those little key ring.
It takes the little fish out of the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to summarise this, then what I think we've sort of touched on is these are an amazing entry level lure fishing, or a lure for and fishing technique.
100%.
So for beginners wanting to, move away from the bait because they've done that for a little bit and they want to get a bit more fancy, vibes.
Yeah, vibes. It's to me, it's the only answer. They're 100 times more reliable than a soft plastic, only because your technique to a point needs to be fairly spot on to catch fish on a soft plastic. But see, and then you delve into bibbed hard bodies, and I'll openly admit it. I still struggle to catch fish on those stupid things. I can't work them out.
So, okay, that's fast. No, this is cool. This is good. I think we've broken down this question really well, Ads. And the question is, why do we hate vibes? And maybe that's where we're moving. You move past them as your fishing career or fishing journey sort of expands into bigger and better things. But
because it's a little bit mindless, and they are unbelievable fish catching options. Let me make that really clear.
When was the last time you whacked a vibe on and had a bit of a crack? And let's
couldn't tell you.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
Couldn't tell you. Which is
so
weird.
Let's do it. Let's go and just do it.
I'm all in because I know how good they are. Now that the question's actually been asked, I'm trying to answer it. I'm even telling myself, why aren't you using vibes, you idiot?
I know. What are we doing? We love vibes.
Exactly. We don't hate them.
The question is, why do we hate vibes? We've
too good.
gotten to the point of this show now where we're like, we love them.
Yeah, but I think it's down to it's a little bit of an elitist thing. You know what I mean? Okay. Like you don't have to be really honed in to know how to use a vibe.
Yeah, and apart from say some of the very targeted sort of northern species in northern part of Australia vibes. There hasn't been, the big fashionable brands necessarily bringing out vibes recently, has there? Into the ranges.
Yeah, that's right.
So
it went through its explosion.
Thing.
Yeah,
I talk about it all the time. This industry is a fashion industry, and that could be another good example of it.
I think there'll be a bite on maybe a lesser known species at some point that'll put vibes back on the map.
Yep.
I don't know what that is. I don't. But for some reason, someone will cast a vibe because they're getting into lure fishing, and for whatever reason, a particular species will just want to eat them, and all of a sudden vibes will be back.
Okay.
At some point.
Well, there's a challenge, people out there listening. If you want to put your stamp on the fishing industry, bring vibes back.
Bring vibes back.
Do something outrageous and catch some amazing fish and bring them back.
Don't hate on the vibe.
Don't hate on it. What a great way to finish, Ads. And I think again, to all the listeners out there that are in the social media space, please jump on Instagram, give us a yell, let us know your thoughts on any of these topics that you see pop up, and we're just here talking a bit of rubbish, to be honest. So we're here to be educated.
That's what we do.
We like to learn. I've learned heaps from our listeners, Ads. The amount of feedback we've had that just makes so much more sense than what we're saying.
Exactly.
It's great. It's really great. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We've had a ball once again. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, wherever you get them, wherever you listen to them. Subscribe and follow along on Spotify or whatever it is. Tell all your friends about it, and then we want to spread the word, have a bit of fun with it. We got a big year coming up, Ads. We've got a lot of exciting things on the horizon, so we want to get more traction and get people involved. And as you may or may not have seen, our ugly faces are on YouTube now, Ads.
Yeah, it's a bit of a worry, Luke. It may be the end of YouTube as we know it, but someone had to end it. It may as well be us.
Yeah, why not? We'll be a part of it. So jump on that, subscribe to that, and Instagram. And like I said, the most important thing about what we're doing is we just want a bit of your thoughts on all of our topics. That's why we do it. We're loving the engagement and the feedback from you guys. So keep it up. Grab the Spotify playlist, which is the Deep Drop Fishing Tunes, and rock out to your heart's content. That's it for us. We will be back very, very soon on the Deep Drop.